Graduating opens up a world of decisions, each with its own set of challenges and rewards. Looking back on our careers, there's choices we'd rethink and mistakes that we've learned from. In this video, we want to share some of these mistakes with you in the hopes of saving you years of mistakes. And by the way, if you find this podcast helpful, make sure to send it to a friend and subscribe so you don't miss out on all the great shit that we drop every Tuesday. My journey went like this. So I had an online wellness personal training business while I was in PT school. It was called American Ambition Fitness, which is a really big mouthful. I had a really cool logo. It was an eagle and then also like some AAF, baby. I had a New Year's challenge. It was great. That was where I started a lot of the social media, personal branding things, but I didn't know I was doing that at the time. And so the number of Instagram accounts that I've created and deleted is insane. And I really wish I would just stick with one. So that's my first tip.
Lesson number one.
Yeah, make one Instagram account.
Start building your personal brand now.
Yeah. So I did that while I was in PT school. When I got out, I got my first job. I also got into CrossFit, which I think was really great because it allowed me to learn other movement patterns, get different experience in just different types of exercise and learn a lot more than just the standard bodybuilding that I had done. About that time, I had also applied to a residency, and when I didn't get in, I just stopped pursuing continuing education for probably the first year. I take that back. I did a dry needling course, but other than that, I didn't really pursue anything. I was like, you know what? My brain needs a break. I've been studying for 3 years. I studied for boards. I'm burnt out. I just want to live. And that's kind of bullshit because one, it's a lot harder once you turn off your studying brain and learning brain and you're just going through the motions, you've become complacent. And so then when you decide, oh, wow, I'm not great.
Wow, I suck.
Yeah. And my patients are getting stuck and I'm looking to these clinic mentors who don't have time to train me and maybe they don't really know how to make it make sense. And so then you have to backtrack. You have to get your brain ready to learn again. And it's just, you're in a mode of learning when you get out of school. So it's better to just go right into continuing education because when you get out of school and you take your board exam, that's permission to play. That's where your learning journey starts, right? That's entrance level. So anyway, I didn't do Con Ed, and then after my first year, I started taking weekend courses, which I just ended up replacing my skill set, which a lot of people do, and so then I would just use all of that in the clinic, or if I took a manual therapy weekend course, I would apply as much as I could, but then I wouldn't have any feedback with how to actually do the techniques that I had a hard time with at the weekend course.
What do you mean by replacing your skill set?
So for instance, when I took a dry needling course, I came back and all the people that, because of my lack of clarity with what was going on, when they didn't get better, I used dry needling as an intervention. They would get better for a few weeks, for a couple of visits, and I'd be like, oh, great. So let's do more dry needling, more dry needling, more dry needling. And so that replaced my clinical reasoning, pseudo replaced, right? They weren't actually getting better. It was just a temporary Band-Aid fix because I didn't know what else to do.
Yeah, so you would go and take a weekend course, and then you would just throw that intervention at everybody without having a thought process behind it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And so that's what I did. My goal was to become this great expert clinician. I wanted to be an authority in the area. I wanted to work with athletes. And I looked at all these people that I aspired to be, and I was like, they're experienced. They have years under their belt. I'll be experienced too. I'll have years under my belt. But the problem with that was I was passively moving towards my great career goal. I was doing nothing, and I was just letting time tick away each day. And if you're just passively going to work, treating patients, you're not going and learning anything, you're not doing anything to get from point A, where I am now, to point B, where I'm an expert. You are going to get to point C, where you have all this arbitrary years of experience where you were fucking around in the clinic, not really knowing if people are getting better, not using clinical reasoning. And the point C is not being an expert therapist. because I wasn't intentional about it. I was just going to work passively, and again, just letting the time tick, because the time is, and the experience is what makes it a great clinician, is how I was thinking about it.
There's a lot of people out there with 15, 20 years of experience that suck.
Yeah, or then by that point, they get complacent and then they don't want to go learn anymore, because then it's,
This is how I've always done it. Or I'm old and crotchety.
Yeah. So from there, I got burned out. I got like a 25-cent raise in my annual review. And by then I had started to see my value and what I was worth, because at the time I was also struggling. And so I look at this as I wasn't making myself grow. I wasn't focused on personal development. And so I was watching a lot of Netflix. I was going to the gym, but I also had a ton of anxiety. I started binge eating. I was still dealing with my eating disorder from when I had been in bodybuilding. And a lot of these were all just symptoms of like, I was just living a complacent life and I wasn't pushing myself.
Unfulfilled.
Yeah, completely unfulfilled. And I knew I wasn't a great clinician. And then I also knew now I was unhappy and burned out in my job. I had a ton of anxiety, I would freak out when I didn't know what was going on with patients. But then when I got a 25-cent raise, I was like, oh, this is stupid. I'm not making enough money, whatever. And so I left. I didn't find what I was looking for in any other job in the area. I had started taking more Con Ed courses, so I was trying to pursue a better skill set, but they were all weekend courses, and we have a whole podcast dedicated to the issue that people run into with those.
Episode 10.
Yeah. But what it turned out was I started my cash practice, and I was running in circles for a couple of years doing that. I had an average skill set. People were getting some of the way better at this point, but I wasn't crushing it. And then later on, when I worked on my skill set and I started to get better outcomes, life got so much easier. And by the way, when I started my practice, that was also when I was pursuing the course of self-development. I started to read more books. I started to do hard things that made me uncomfortable. If you want to get uncomfortable, go fucking try to sell something to strangers. Go make friends in a place that you don't know anybody. Go where nobody knows you and try to build a reputation. That's hard. So as all of that was going better and you're doing these hard things and you're building this mental callus and mental toughness, a lot of the anxiety, a lot of the issues that I had been dealing with personally began to fade, but I was freaking burnt out, exhausted, running myself in circles because I hadn't addressed the skill set problem yet. And later, that was what got addressed that got me better outcomes that have significantly leveled up the profitability. It would have saved me so much time and money in my first practice. And looking back, all of this to say, I wish I would have focused specifically and intentionally on my skill set sooner. I wish I would have gone from point A to point B intentionally. I wish I would have avoided the in-house mentorship that got promised and just chose something for myself. I wish I wouldn't have taken my rejection from a residency application to say, oh no, my brain's tired. I'm just gonna bullshit around for a year. I wish I would have focused on my skill set and become a better clinician sooner.
What helped you with your skill set?
The Performance Rehab Authority.
Weird.
If you can learn anything from my experience and my years being out and all of the ups and downs, whether it's personally, professionally, the value that you're getting from your job.
What's the difference? Because you had a practice, your own, right? Before going through and learning the Performance Rehab Authority algorithms and the clinical reasoning and everything that's taught in the course, what's been the difference in your clinical care, in your outcomes, in the results? Because there's a lot of people out there in business that are coming out of school or have been treating for a couple of years that are I'm going to go get in cash practice. And all the coaches, all the business coaches out there will tell them, oh, are your patients getting better right now? Yeah, mostly. Okay, cool. So then open a business, right? But you have firsthand experience of not really becoming a great clinician before opening a practice and where that got you in your practice versus where your practice is now after focusing on the skill set. Because people will say, go out, learn the marketing, learn the sales, do that, right? It doesn't matter if you're a great clinician because you got to figure out how to get people to pay you money.
Right.
So what was it like before in your first practice?
So when I'm an average clinician, right, and I think a lot of people can relate to this, you're an average clinician, you open a practice, you have to portray yourself as the expert no matter what. Because if you just say, hey, I'm an average clinician, you want to come in? Like, fuck no. Absolutely not. So the difference is I was busting my ass like 7 days a week, marketing events, treating it all hours of the day from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. So at my best, in my first practice, I was at a 47% conversion rate for people coming into my ecosystem and deciding to stay and work with me. And now, at my worst, I'm at about 75 to 80% conversion rate consistently for people coming in and staying with me. And it's because when you have the understanding and knowing how to make it make sense and build authority on day one and explain it in a way that nobody's ever explained it to people before, and show them that this is what you're dealing with and this is how you're going to get better, and write out the entire plan for them, they're going to trust you and they're not going to want to go anywhere else. And so that's the difference between me busting my ass and making $168,000 a year, whereas I would have made well over 3 times that if I just had the skill set that I do now. If I could go back in time, that would make the difference.
Yeah, so it sounds like the first thing you would do is, in summary, right, you would have one Instagram account and you would just keep building your personal brand from the early stages, from that very first American as fuck, American AF, American Ambition Fitness.
Yeah.
Right? You would just have that one account, you would build it, you would keep maintaining and growing your audience through one account, not multiple accounts, shutting them down, starting them all over again. And it sounds like you would have heavily focused on your clinical skill set and not taken a bunch of weekend courses, but really try to do something to get the framework and the overall thought process.
Exactly.
And those are like the big things that you would change.
Yeah. I think that would have naturally and organically led into the personal development that then also solves all the other like personal issues that you deal with as a byproduct of just being complacent and not pushing yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think like if I can save you years of all of that going in circles and trying to figure it the fuck out, like that's what it comes down to in a nutshell.
Yeah. So I have a little bit of a different story than Kaylin does, or a very different story. I am a high school dropout, right? I dropped out of high school and joined the Marine Corps at the ripe old age of 16 because I was a knuckleheaded kid and into some bad shit and drugs and bad crowds, and I needed to get away from the people that I was associating myself with, and that is the solution that I came up with. I went to my mom's house, probably still high as hell, and I was like, you just have some paperwork. That's what initially got me into fitness. I really had no plans on becoming a physical therapist or like big, great plans with my life. I just knew that something needed to change, and that's what I did. And then that's where I really discovered and found fitness, where I also, it was early days of CrossFit, 2008, I was in Iraq somewhere and I stumbled upon CrossFit somehow. And that's where I went when I got out of the Marine Corps. I started coaching at a gym and I became the head coach at that gym. And I did that for 6 years before I kind of partnered. The original owner left, moved back to their home state of Colorado, and I partnered with somebody else there, which was a terrible partnership. We talked about that in the last episode a little bit. But seeing the problems that those people had, people would come in and they would lose 50, 80, 100 pounds. They'd get off all their diabetes medication, their heart medication, all their metabolic diseases would disappear, and they'd start dealing with the orthopedic injuries, like just active lifestyle problems, like, oh, well, my back hurts when I run, or my knee hurts when I squat, and they would go out and they'd see a PT, a chiropractor, a surgeon, a primary care, massage therapist, whoever, and they'd be like, ooh, that's bad for you. You should stop that. I'm like, fuck no, that is the worst answer that you could possibly get. Like, you're literally half the human that you used to be, and you're the healthiest ever. And I started taking a really personal interest in helping these people. I followed K-Star, shout out to the Ready State, along, and he gave me a very false sense of what physical therapy was going to be. But, I liked what he was doing. way back in the early mobility WOD days where he's just posting his things on YouTube, and the first video was like 10 minutes of him sitting in a squat and you looking at his nuts. Like that's what it was. Check it out. Episode 1 of the mobility WOD. Like, it was terrible, right? But I started following along that and started using some of that stuff and a bunch of other like self-education that I was doing along the way to help these athletes in the gym when they weren't getting help. And I was like, well, it seems like I'm fairly decent at this. I should go maybe get some like legit education and credentialing behind my name and like actually help these people. So that's what led me to go to PT school. And when I was in PT school, I found out like, oh man, because I didn't bother to like go and shadow. I'd never been through physical therapy. I never really looked into the profession besides like the people that I followed on the internet, which were the people doing what I wanted to do, which is not what the profession itself does. So I had a very rude awakening in PT school. And I was like, wow, this is not what I thought. And this costs a lot of money. And then when I got out of PT school, I had fucking no idea what I was doing, right? My first evaluation, I walked into my boss's office and I was like, Tina, what do I do? I have a shoulder evaluation. She was like, look at this, this, and this. And I was like, roger that. Went out, got the patient, brought him back, looked at those 3 things, and I was like, I'll be right back. T, what do I do next? Right? And that was my experience. But I knew that at that job that they would pay for a lot of education for me and they would accommodate my schedule. I knew it was going to be a grind and a hustle. So I stumbled upon them because actually my first assignment, my first college class after the Marine Corps, they were like, go find somebody that you want to be in the profession and interview them for an hour. And I was actually going to go to PTA school because I was like, oh, I got kids and that's easy, it's quick. I'll go to PTA school and then maybe I'll go to PT school. And the PT that I interviewed was like, no, that's dumb. You should just go to PT school. And I was like, okay, cool. I'm just going to go to PT school. But I also saw that they were heavily invested in education. I was like, So I kept that relationship open all throughout PT school. And actually, my first year of PT school, I just went and hung out there every Friday because we don't have Friday classes. So I just went and hung out every Friday to build that relationship to make sure that I got a job there when I was done because I wanted to be involved in these heavy education programs that were available through them paying for it. And accommodating my schedule. So then I got a job there and I immediately started going into mentorship, right? So that's what puts me a little bit different than everybody else is that I started treating. There was a little lapse when I started treating because the FSBT, BPT, whatever it is, like they told me that they didn't have my transcripts after I'd already sat for the board exam and passed it. And I was like, well, that's illegal. You guys definitely have them. Otherwise I shouldn't be able to sit here and take this exam. So there's a little lapse of when I started treating. But then I was only training for a few months before I actually started my residency. But even in that time, I was fucking burnt out, right? Because I had no idea it literally took me a few months to be like, this is stupid. Seeing 4 patients an hour, every hour on the hour. So it's like Caitlin and her 3 friends comes in all at the same time. I'm putting out fires, I'm juggling things, and I have no idea what I'm doing. I've created a bunch of shoulder patients and I diagnosed them all with impingement. Right, like it's everybody's diagnosis. Like, you got impingement, and everybody had the same diagnosis, the same treatment, and it was usually just shit that I saw my coworkers doing. So I was very grateful that I got into mentorship very early, but it was a grind. It was a hustle, right? Like it was not easy. I had to drive 100 miles one way, twice a week for mentorship, and I did that for several years. So I had a residency, and then I started overlapping a fellowship halfway through that residency. And then when I ended that residency, I started overlapping another fellowship with the other fellowship. So it was a lot. It was a ton. I ended up spending over 40 grand, and I was waking up at 3 a.m. and not getting home until 10 p.m. So I guess this business grind is really nothing new. I've been doing it a long time. I'm always looking forward to the next thing of like, oh, after this, I'll be able to relax. It never happens. But either way, I wouldn't change that at all because that's what allowed me to go through and become where I am today and like have what we're doing today to be able to help clinicians. The one thing that I would change about that first job is that I got paid shit. I was making a $60,000 salary and they were hiring people making more than me. I negotiated a $10,000 raise at one point, and that's the one thing I would go back and change is I would stick to my guns and I would try to get double that, which is what I asked for, but they cut it in half. Yeah, and then, as soon as I finished my my programs, my final fellowship, I was still like grinding it out and kind of miserable. And then one day I woke up and I was like, fuck, I don't want to do this anymore. I was like, well, what do you mean you don't want to do this? And I was like, you don't want to help people? Like, you just put a lot of time and money and effort into helping people and becoming decent at it. And I was like, nah, that's not it. I just can't do it this way anymore. So I gave 3 weeks notice and opened a cash clinic with no idea what I was doing. I just had a buddy that owned a gym, and I was like, hey man, can I treat people in your lobby area? And they're like, yeah, sure. I would change that because I had a profit sharing agreement with them where I gave them 10% of everything that I earned. And that was terrible. It wasn't bad when I was making $1,500 a month, but when I was making $15,000 a month, right, $25,000 a month, that fucking sucks. It was like, oh, I'm paying you a shit ton of money, and you're like doing nothing. So that's something that I would change. And then from there, like I started coaching clinicians with PT Biz, and I, in that situation, that pulled me away from singularity of focus. So my own personal clinic didn't grow nearly as much as it could have in that time period, but I was able to have a very large impact on the physical therapy community as a whole by helping other cash practice owners get up and get started and teach them the lessons learned and all that stuff. Now we're here with the PRA, and we're helping on an even bigger level of setting everybody up for success. So honestly, there's not much that I would change about the path that I've had so far. And I guess that's true for my whole life, because then I wouldn't be where I am today right now. But I am very grateful that I didn't have to go through the struggle that you went through with the clinical skill set of opening a business and then not having that clinical skill set and having that hold me back, because that's something that I've seen through my time coaching other businesses. I've seen that be a linchpin for them over and over and over and over again because they just weren't great.
Yeah. And so I take all of that, I think, the struggle with a grain of salt, because when you struggle, you value something more. If it's easy, you don't value it. If you didn't have to work hard to grow your business, it's gonna be like, oh yeah, I did this thing, but it doesn't feel like an accomplishment. And that's not to say that you need to sit there and struggle with your skill set. I'm appreciative of the entire journey that I've had to get where I am, but I can save you a lot of time and struggle by just giving you all this advice. So there's, I have this tattoo on my arm, Amor Fati. It's
means I love fatties.
it means love of fate. And I got it by listening to the Daily Stoic when I started pursuing more self-growth and when I was just trying to make sense of everything, right? And basically, everything that you've gone through brings you to exactly where you are. The struggles, the good, the bad. It puts you in this position with this perspective, with this skill set. And from that point, you can have an amazing trajectory.
If there was a way for me to have shortcut the process and not have made all those sacrifices, right, then I would have fucking done that. That's the whole point with our Performance Rehab Authority course. And this is kind of a sidebar. It's like, you can get all the knowledge without all the sacrifice. At this point, that's what we're doing, right? That's what we're providing. I want to teach people all the shit that I've learned without them having to, we want to teach everybody all the shit that we've learned without them having to parse through the bullshit and the fluff and weed out what works and doesn't, and just waste a bunch of fucking time and money. It doesn't need to be that way. If there was a place that I could have just licensed, their method of operating for a cash clinic instead of figuring it all out and having to struggle and build it from the ground up, I definitely would have taken that road. And at the same time, I appreciate the struggle that I've had to go through, because through that struggle has come immense personal growth and tons of lessons learned. And without the struggle, there is no growth. You got to choose your heart, right?
And I think too, and this is the thing, if you can shortcut the process to get from point A to point B, you can get somewhere sooner in your career, you can make more money earlier, capitalize on your skill set, and you can do so much more in your life by saving yourself that time up front.
Nobody becomes great on accident.